This is the footnotes, the PS, the whatever happened to, and what the hell are you talking about? I didn't explain the Natchez Trace. I just figured everybody knows about the Natchez Trace. So here's a real quick one. In 1803, Napoleon Bonaparte sold us the Louisiana Purchase. Sold it to Thomas Jefferson. That's what you hear, right? That's true. A lot of people don't talk about the 3 to 5 years prior. Spain was involved because Spain kind of thought they owned it and France kind of owned it. Now we're talking about Natchez and New Orleans and all that. I mean, they really care about up towards Canada, but that was part of it too. So the purchase was made in 1803. But leading up to it, Spain basically had to agree to it too. It's all rather complicated, and it kind of informs you about Stephen, the Creek Indian that's a Spaniard but speaks French. It's all kind of wrapped up together, and it's weird how that worked that way, but I didn't make it up. So the trace, the Natchez Trace. Actually, the official one only really ran for like 15 years. Now it's run forever. It began, the trace, if there is really such a thing. There's tracks and paths all over America before the white man and now too. This particular track comes out of Nashville, the French Lick. That's a salt lick. Apparently there were buffalo. I still have a hard time believing it, but that's what they say. And I don't know if the Indians killed them all out or we did. I don't see a lot of us, you don't see a lot of history about the Daniel Boone chasing down a buffalo, but we'll go with it. The deer ran down. These were trails left by animals, deer, whatever. And the Indians began, it's a path, and it goes down to wherever, and this time it went to Natchez. Now for my book, the interesting part is that trace was in use longer over Pea Ridge than it was by Colbert's Ferry, because the original one came down from Tennessee, from Hardin County, and I've driven it, most of my family has. That's the Pea Ridge Road you follow to go to Panther Creek or Union Hollow, and if you follow it all the way down, all of a sudden you just roll down the hill and there's Waterloo. Well, that's the same path they used in 1800, which was when Colbert was there. I've always wondered, what day did they move? I'm assuming it had to do with Doublehead's death, more or less, because in that time frame of 1808, it seems to have become more active, particularly with our commerce. The thing about the trace is you would take a flatboat of material, pelts, whiskey, corn, and you go up to Tennessee, which is going towards Nashville, and you curve up the Cumberland River, the Ohio, then all of a sudden you get to Mississippi, you fly down to either New Orleans or Natchez, you offload your stuff, and they keep your flatboat. They use the wood from the flatboat to make buildings. You ever been to Natchez? I bet there's a lot of our wood inside those pretty mansions, but then you would walk home. So that stretch between Natchez, back up, you go through French Camp, you go through Tupelo, and then you end up, you got to make either going to go right towards Colbert's Ferry, but back in the day, this was the Chickasaw Road, and you would go directly across to Old Eastport and cross to Waterloo. It just makes sense. You're not messing with Bear Creek, which it's a substantial creek. So when they moved it, I've always wondered, it's always been better right there in the corner. You got that, you can go right past the Bear Creek, you can use the Bear Creek. So that's my Natchez Trace explanation. The Parks. Joseph Park and his brothers. One of them's name was James, he had another one named Nathan, I think Robert. I don't really get to know those, but I did look at the family a little bit. They came from Ireland, obviously. Joseph came first, and it looks like some more brothers came, and then the whole family showed up. Now they moved into Pennsylvania, very near Daniel Boone. Well, that's where the father went. The brothers all seemed to go in different areas of the country, and I think they came with a plan, and it worked, to set up a hardware business. And what was happening was you had one Park back in Baltimore. You had Joseph down in Knoxville. He would move to Nashville. Thanks, Sam. Joseph Park immediately went to Knoxville. I've got an article, and maybe I'll put it on this, I don't know. He set up a hardware store right at this landing that came out of South Carolina. And it's in the same time frame that I think my Thomas Parker was coming across. So almost assuredly they met on a flatboat, or he bought a knife from him, or probably a coonskin calf. The only reason I know anything about the Parks, more or less, is because his brother, James, was the second mayor of Knoxville. Now this was just a hovel, a bunch of mud and log cabins. But he was prominent there, and he ended up, like all politicians, he got filthy rich, and he's got a huge mansion. They're Irish immigrants. I mean, they just got off the boat, and they're already in the hardware business. Well, James stayed in Knoxville, and Joseph went up to Nashville. After he got rid of Doublehead, he became rather wealthy, or did while he had him. He donated to the school there in town. He was a pretty good guy, it looked like. He didn't cause any trouble, and he passed away in the 1830s. And he left in his estate one particular letter, which I'm going to add to this, that's very interesting to look at. It's the books that, as an Irish immigrant, he thought was important, and it's a pretty good read. I didn't spend really any time on the Ranger, the Ranger of Davidson County. That was Thomas Dillahunty. He's actually got a son, a Dillahunty, that migrated about the same time and probably fits into this picture later in the chapter. I hadn't figured it out yet. But Thomas Dillahunty, I'm not saying he was dishonest, but he kept the records. And I think he was kind of hired and picked by Andrew Jackson and all the horse racing people. It's kind of like the NFL football with Goodell. You know, they pick the toady, the one that they can slap around, and he acts like he's in charge, but you know he's probably under the table doing something pretty dirty. I mean, I didn't add the story about Dillahunty, and it's bad. About the time he finished being the Ranger, I think this is what put him out. He, for some reason, was in his backyard shooting at birds with a musket. And his daughter, he shot his daughter in the head, and it took her a while to die. Look, it's horrible. So I didn't add that, but it's those little interesting things in the newspaper. I mean, you read it, so. And then there's Tecumseh and his brother. I can't say his brother, I just call him the Prophet. Now, he was an alcoholic, and he did blind himself with a bow and arrow, which again, I mean, I can barely shoot a bow and arrow, so I see him doing that, but I'm not an Indian. So, well, Tecumseh went down south, and he had left things with the Prophet up at their Prophet's town. The Prophet had a town, and the Prophet was just supposed to take care of things, keep everything under control. It's okay, big bro, I got it. Well, he has one of his crazy ass dances, and he starts telling them, we're gonna do this, and I can stop bullets. And one thing leads to another, and he makes the Americans mad. Well, they come and basically break the camp up, and they survive, but they kind of messed it up by the Prophet let the cat out of the bag. The Prophet, like Nant, he went too fast. They wanted to sneak up on us. They didn't want to actually, when the Creeks came up and got the Manly and the Crawleys, I'm pretty sure Tecumseh's going, that wasn't the plan, guys. But again, he's the one that said, when the leaves grow thick. But the Creeks went way, and if it was the Creeks, obviously, but their timing was off. But they had no written language, so you can't send a memo. Tecumseh got killed in battle in 1813. William Henry Harrison and his guys. It wasn't at Tippecanoe, but we'll pretend it was, because I like saying Tippecanoe and Tyler too. I remember that. Well, the Shawnee War kept going, and the Prophet, pretty much, they figured out, well, maybe we shouldn't listen to an Indian that shoots his own eye out with a bow, is an alcoholic, and has DTs. It's a bad idea. I haven't discussed the Creek Indian War much at all. It's a rather ugly little thing. There was a massacre at a Fort Mims. That's when they really jumped ugly. And Fort Mims is further down in Alabama. Again, whiskey played a part in this. It's weird how that keeps happening. I'm not making it up. I am an alcoholic, but that's not why I keep seeing it, obviously. But so the Creeks, they called them red sticks, because they would get a stick and it was curved. You get a certain piece of wood, and you just polish it. You paint it red, and then you can take a rock, you stick it in there, you tie it with a string, and you can beat the hell out of somebody, beat somebody's head to jelly. I like saying that. So the red sticks, they kind of jumped ugly up on the border. And so all the pioneers and the settlers said, we better fort up. Everybody bring your people in from the cabins. And so they were gonna build forts. And so they built this fort called Fort Mims after some knucklehead. Well, they got half of it finished in one of the cabins, and they weren't hearing anything about the Creeks, so they thought, well, the hell with this, let's just take it easy. We'll drink this whiskey, we'll finish the other part of the wall later. Not a big deal. Well, it was a big deal, because guess where the Red Sticks went next? And they slaughtered over 100 other white people, and slaves too. They killed the Americans. And now they did, if you read about it, you're not going to be going, well, the Americans, we started scalping them first, and I don't know who did it. That doesn't matter. Anyway, if you're wondering why Andrew Jackson burnt the Indians in the cabin, he burned them to death until it smelled like bacon. It's what Crockett said. It made him mad. That's why. And Crockett got mad at Jackson. You're going to find out later. But, you know, the Tennessee kept voting him into office, so apparently somebody liked him. And Crockett did leave, and he went to Texas. So, and the last thing is, obviously, famous Mortimer. I mean, when you read that, you're going, you got to find out why. And it was a real letdown. I mean, they named him Famous Mortimer. And that's got to be a tough life for anybody. Can you imagine going to in high school being called famous and not being famous? They would be. So no wonder he never had a junior, apparently. On genealogy, people act like he had a junior that didn't survive to be 11. That may be true, but he probably got bullied to death. Famous Mortimer survived until 1851. He was 89 years old. He applied for his pension for the Revolutionary War, which is really pretty tough for people to get, believe it or not. America was pretty poor early 1810, 1820. The Revolutionary War veterans really got hung out to dry. There was no VA, and you could get a land deed grant, but you had to jump through a lot of hoops, and some of my people did it, but most didn't. It looks like too much work. Well, Famous tried to get his pretty late in life. I think his wife may have gotten it because she was younger, because he had a family when he moved to, another family when he came to Kentucky. If there's anything about him that I just can't find out why he's famous. Captain Famous Mortimer's 1808 pirogue canoe race on the Tennessee River was as famous ever got.